Welcome to Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning for Thursday, December 21st. I'm your host, Tom Orr. The Cotton Bowl game against Missouri in 8 days. The game against Michigan in 345 days. Early signing day is now in the rearview mirror, or at least mostly in the rearview mirror. It is always one of the crazier days on the college football calendar, and we got a real inside look at all of the insanity on Wednesday. Not one, but two five-star prospects making their final decisions involving Ohio State while we were sitting in the team room at Ohio State. So you got to watch Ryan Day sort of react to things live as they happened. His press conference got interrupted twice, once by a phone call, once by a Big Ten Network appearance. It was one of those days, Tony Gerdeman, that we are going to remember for a long time, I suspect, as one of the wilder ones on the Ohio State beat. That's always one of those fun topics, like, oh, what was the craziest day you could remember? And just as I was sitting in there watching all of this unfolding around me, I could just feel this day kind of like climbing up that list of the crazier days in Ohio State football history.
Yeah, a major college football coach like Ryan Day doesn't have to answer to many people, but ironically, they do have to answer to a five-star defensive end on the phone when they're making a call. No matter when that call is being made, they do have to step away and take it. We did Buckeye Huddle. We did a 7-hour signing day marathon, and it was basically a tale of two halves, tale of two shows, where for the first part of the day, Eddrick Houston is drifting away, and Jeremiah Smith, you're not sure what's going to happen there because there are reports and rumors that he might be headed to Florida State or Miami or whatever. And so this is the tone of the show. And then, during that press conference was kind of like the midpoint of the whole affair. They get both of those guys, although Ryan Day was never able to talk about Jeremiah Smith because the letter of intent hadn't been sent in yet. And so the show ends on a much happier beat than the one it began on. People in the comments were in a good mood. It turns out the sky had stopped falling and was actually returning to its normal glory up in the heavens by the time the show was over. And an entertaining day all around. Certainly not entertaining for the coaches who have to live it. And as Ryan Day said, I think maybe after the second sabbatical he took and he came back, he's like, now you guys kind of understand what it's like on signing days when things are happening and you've got to go step away, or you got to go do this, you got to go do that.
Well, and we've seen Ohio State football seasons sort of hinge on one thing, one tiny little thing that's going to be the difference between they beat Michigan or they don't beat Michigan. Ryan Day was asked at one point during the press conference about Josh Simmons stepping on Donovan Jackson's foot, and then that led to Kyle McCord getting pressured and hit right as he was throwing it, and that was the difference between an interception and potentially a completion on that last drive. And, this is after all the Jeremiah Smith stuff had happened and maybe the Eddrick Houston stuff too. And he just was like, I understand what you're asking, but man, it was basically don't harsh my vibe, man, was the sort of the answer there. And then he went on and answered it. But it was so crazy that Jeremiah Smith deciding between Miami and Ohio State swings the narrative so much. And Eddrick Houston deciding between Alabama and Ohio State. And both of those, by all accounts, came down to the day. And just as of the time of recording, which is 4:55 Eastern time, Jeremiah Smith has not actually technically sent in his letter of intent. Ohio State has not tweeted anything out officially announcing him as part of the class. So the drama may or may not actually be done there. There was a tweet from Manny Navarro, who was on the scene at Jeremiah Smith's announcement. He said, Jeremiah Smith said he had two hats in his bag, Miami and Ohio State. He ultimately decided in the final 2 minutes he wanted to go to a place with a strong track record of first-round picks. That was the difference. You want to know why the Ohio State head football coaching job ages people faster than the U.S. presidency? That's why, because there's a kid in South Florida sitting with two hats in a bag, and after years and years of recruiting, it comes down to what is he feeling right before he announces. I can't, we got to see Ryan Day. It was a little theatrical, but his knees buckled a little bit, like as he was sort of like processing the news. Mark Pantoni sort of popped in the back door and gave him, I don't know, thumbs up or something to indicate like, yes, the news is the good news. They couldn't officially announce it until Jeremiah Smith signed, but man, it was just you get a sense for what life is like and how stressful things are in that building on a day like this.
Yeah, and I agree. The leg buckle was a little bit theatrical. He did that for effect, but you could also hear his breathing and his speech after that. That was to me not theatrical. That was legitimate. Like the sigh of relief, you know the concern that things weren't going your way, the avoidance of that narrative that could have turned with just that guy leaving. And so you get to keep him, we believe, at this point. And you got the crown of the class there, and obviously keeping Eddrick Houston. You're just able to keep things, keep the Wolves at bay, basically with those two things. And you lose Jeremiah McClellan, the 4-star wide receiver who switched and flipped to Oregon, but in that all gets wiped away. That gets kind of overshadowed by the fact that you kept Jeremiah Smith. It's kind of like 2013 when they re-kept Ezekiel Elliott. You get these things that's what makes some of the signing days themselves a win or a loss. Like if you have somebody that just creates some drama and sides with you, even though they've been with you all along, it can make the day seem like a win. Whereas if they had said nothing and there was no drama and they signed with you and they were the third person to send their facts in, it's like, yeah, that's great, but what's happening at 2 p.m.? There's if you don't have the right kind of drama, signing day can seem disappointing, because a lot of times the only drama is bad drama. Most times the only drama is bad drama, especially on signing day for Ohio State.
Well, and the Jeremiah McClellan flip to Oregon was a little bit of bad drama, but it feels like that was almost a forgotten part of the day very quickly because, I mean, first of all, where is Ohio State best positioned to lose a high 4-star and just kind of go, yeah, don't worry about it. We got a bunch of others. Wide receiver seems like, yeah, if you were going to choose a unit to lose a high 4-star off of, wide receiver feels like the one where they would say, okay, you have the depth there that it's not as much of a concern. Assuming Jeremiah Smith does sign, you got the guy you absolutely had to get out of that class, out of that wide receiver position. You can kind of hand wave it to a certain degree was absolutely not the case with Eddrick Houston. He was, they had already lost Justin Scott in the class. They had missed out on several other defensive ends in the class as well. And so Eddrick Houston, when he started waffling a little bit towards the end of the process, he took a visit to Clemson, he took a visit to Alabama. There was a lot of smoke from some very respected national recruiting people who are not just sort of drumming up drama. There was a lot of smoke from a couple of those guys that Alabama was trending with Eddrick Houston, and it looked like he was slipping away from Ohio State. That was the phone call that Ryan Day left the room to take. He walked out to talk to Eddrick Houston, was gone maybe 10 minutes or so, and then came back in a great mood. I mean, like, big smile on his face. There was nothing theatrical about it. It was just, I thought back to the end of the 2019 Michigan game when he was asked, it might have been you who asked him, what are you feeling right now? Is it, excitement and joy, or is it relief? And it looked like maybe a little bit of both for Ryan Day. And he couldn't say exactly what the news was, but then a few minutes later, the Eddrick Houston staying with Ohio State news broke. And so it was pretty clear why Ryan Day was in such a good mood. But that was one you couldn't lose, because they were thin at the defensive end position in the 2022 class or 2023 class. Now in 2024, he's their only edge player so far. We'll get to what else could be coming in a little bit, but that was one where you had to get Eddrick Houston. There was no fallback plan that was like, well, almost as good. That was the difference between you've got a great player in a probably too small class, and this is a disaster.
Yeah. When one guy can double your class size, that tells you how small that class was looking to be, and then not to just double it, go from 1 to 2, but a guy that is very, very talented. And I think Ryan Day said they expect him to play next year as a true freshman. So now you've got somebody that adds to the depth, not just adds to your class, but adds to the depth next year. And, and maybe more importantly adds to the depth in 2025 when maybe if you get Jack Sawyer, you get JT Tuimoloau back next year, then 2025 is the year where everybody else needs to step up even more so. So, yeah, this is another one where you're chasing away the narrative and you close. And defensive end has been so difficult for Ohio State the last few years to land the 5 stars that they're leading for forever, and then they go off to their different places. And, it's like they go to Ohio State for summer camp to make friends for life. And it's like, oh, okay, we'll stay in touch forever. And then they all go their separate ways and they never speak again. And that's what defensive end recruiting has been like for Ohio State. But it was interesting to me that Ryan Day said that Larry Johnson is expected to be back next year. And I wonder how much that went into Eddrick Houston's decision as well, where, at this point, it seems like there's going to be no change there, which is what somebody who's being recruited wants to hear. So, they got the guy they needed to get. And now, so you got one interior guy, one exterior guy, and maybe, like you said, there may be more coming.
Well, and the more coming could be Dominic Kirks. He is a defensive line prospect, defensive end out of Painesville, Ohio. That's up in the Cleveland area. Ranked 251st overall in the nation, 33rd ranked defensive lineman in the 247 composite, 12th ranked player in the state of Ohio. And he's someone who Ohio State has had in for a visit. And I think there's just sort of been a little bit of a division on the Ohio State coaching staff. Do you offer him? Do you not offer him? He hadn't been offered. You got to signing day. He was expected to sign with Washington, who he's been committed to for quite a while now. And then he didn't sign with Washington. He committed to Washington at the end of June. He had visited Ohio State this fall. And as of 5 p.m. on the East Coast, he has still not signed with Washington. There's a lot of smoke that he may be, Ohio State may be trying to get back involved there. And that may be part of the decision, the delay in signing with Washington. This is another one, Tony, that feels like after taking a thin defensive line class, especially at the end position last year, you can't just take 2 guys. They got Eric Mensah in the interior. They got Eddrick Houston on the edge. It feels like I have been waiting for them to offer Dominic Kirks for months and months and months, and it hasn't happened. It feels like maybe they might try and swoop in at the 11th hour. They just stole Lincoln Keenholz from Washington last year. He was a Washington commit before he signed with Ohio State. They, if they can do it again here, it would not only be big for the defensive line class and for Larry Johnson, but it would also probably set the Ohio State-Washington rivalry up for a little bit of drama when they become conference mates next season.
Well, and I said this on the live show on signing days. This is part of the danger in a Washington coach going after an Ohio player where, sure, Ohio State may not be interested in them now, but they're going to keep an eye on them. And if they need to come in and swoop in later on, you're going to have to deal with that. And, Kalen DeBoer can talk about loyalty and we've been with you the entire way. But what does Kalen DeBoer say to his quarterbacks that he's recruited that he is also bringing in transfers to start over them? So this is a two-way street in terms of loyalty. And so every player has to do what is best for them. Now, obviously, Dominic Kirks fell in love with Washington, and he may still end up being, going there. But this is also a very serious decision. So I guess we shouldn't be surprised that something like this would take a long time once the home school gets involved. A lot of guys in his position grow up dreaming of playing for the home school, whether it's Ohio State, whether it's Michigan, Penn State, whatever. And then that dream kind of goes away. And so you move on, but then you get a knock on the door or a call on your phone and say, hey, it's your dream. And not knowing that it is even his dream, but we've seen this play out so many times before in recruiting that this can be hard to overcome for an out-of-state school. Of course, we've also seen where kids can get really hardened if they don't get an offer from that in-state school and really just build up a callous towards that school. I mean, there's nothing you can do. You have scarred me. You have hurt me. You have disrespected me. All of those things. I can't wait to beat you when Washington joins the Big Ten or whatever. Like, That sometimes this is how heroes are made, and sometimes this is how villains are made.
Well, Dominic Kirk's, Jeremiah Smith, still technically up in the air right now until the ink is on the paper, and the paper is emailed, not faxed in. It's not official yet, but I did want to take a look at the class on the whole, because this is one of these things, like, you remember the dress, and it was like some people thought it was green or blue or whatever, and some people thought it was like black and gold, and it's like, how could you possibly see it this way? And it was just, some people saw it one way, some people saw it the other. The Ohio State 2024 recruiting class is like the dress in recruiting class form. Here's the pro. The Buckeyes signed 5 5-stars in the 247 composite, if you include Jeremiah Smith. That's the most of any team. More 5-stars in the 247 composite than any other team. Jeremiah Smith, Mylan Graham, Eddrick Houston, Aaron Scott, Air Noland. They have 2 cornerbacks ranked in the top 60 overall. Class is 3rd overall in the nation. Class is 2nd in average player rating, behind only Georgia and ahead of Alabama. So if you're recruiting in that area, it is a great class. However, right now they have 2 defensive linemen committed. They needed to be taking like 5 this year. They have 4 offensive linemen, but they just have not been able to add that one premium national guy, the Jordan Seaton type, who is, speaking of signing day drama, currently not signed, even though he committed to Colorado a few weeks ago. Rumors of a possible flip to Maryland, of all places. Keep an eye on that for you. But, it felt like, boy, in some ways, this is such a great class. In some ways, boy, they fell short in some areas where they really couldn't afford to fall short this year. But landing Eddrick Houston means maybe it's okay in the defensive line room. If it's not spectacular, it's a lot better than it could have been. So I don't know. At this point, let's just assume Jeremiah Smith signs and, call Dominic Kirk's of, whatever, 50-50. What is this class to you?
Well, I mean, it's going to finish top 5 most likely. And right now, I think it is the number 5 class in the composite, like you said. And you look at the class for the misses, because sometimes the misses are what cost you. Like with the defensive line class as it is right now, and you combine it with the defensive ends that they recruited last year that they didn't get, you start to put these things together, and that becomes the story of this class being a success or not. Everybody wants to have the number 1 class in the nation, but you also have to have the right guys. And we came into this thinking that Ohio State, into this recruiting cycle, thinking Ohio State is going to get between 27 and 30 players because of the way things are now. And they're sitting at 21 commits, 21 signees, 19 signees, whatever it is at this point, 20. And maybe they'll add in some more between now and February. There are not a lot of names out there. So they're not going to hit that. I don't think they're going to hit that 27, 28, 29 number. So you make that up in the portal, but also they're waiting for certain guys to leave before they decide if they want to go after anybody in the portal at those positions. And as Ryan Day said, they're at like 82 or 83 scholarships right now. Tom, I found it interesting that Ryan Day never talks about scholarship numbers when they're over. The only time he talked about it recently is when he was asked if they did well enough in their defensive line numbers in this class. And he's like, well, we have like 83 or 80, 82, 83 scholarships, so we don't really have much room remaining. And it was just interesting to me that, they've never had an issue going over before. And now in defense of the numbers on the defensive line, he's saying, well, we can't go over.
Yeah, I mean, this is not the deadline where you can't be over 85. That comes in August, and you got to figure there's going to be NFL draft declarations in January, and there's going to be another wave of transfers after next spring, possibly transfers in and out. So, yeah, the number right now, I think most college coaches are going to treat that as almost meaningless. So, and Ohio State has certainly seemed like they did not treat it as particularly meaningful in the past. So I'm not sure how much stock they really put in that as a deciding factor on whether to take guys or not. But they're going to be there will probably be more names in this on this roster between now and mid-January or so when some of those NFL draft declarations take place. He talked about potentially going into the portal to add some guys. Going to have some NFL draft decisions coming up. Going to have some guys making decisions on playing or not playing in the Cotton Bowl coming up. Got we'll find out whether tomorrow's show we know whether Jeremiah Smith has signed or not by tomorrow's show. We will find out whether Dominic Kirks has signed somewhere by tomorrow's show. There's a whole bunch more to talk about here at youtube.com/Buckeye Huddle on your podcast platform of choice, and of course at BuckeyeHuddle.com, where we had a very long and active signing day thread. It had a very long 7-hour live show on our YouTube channel. Mark and Kevin and Tony and I all on there for a little bit, talking, answering thousands of questions, it felt like, and much more. So make sure you check us out at BuckeyeHuddle.com, youtube.com/Buckeye Huddle, and on your podcast platform of choice. We'll be back with plenty more to talk about on recruiting and the transfer portal and the Cotton Bowl. And, Michigan got the notice of applications dumped on them by the NCAA on Wednesday. Probably talk about that at some point as well, all at BuckeyeHuddle.com. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.